Now that the dust of The Rings of Power Season 2 has settled a bit and we're time to think about the show, it is time to come to some kind of final conclusion, and that is what I want to do in this video today. My name is Chris, aka The Philosopher's Games, and of course, spoiler warning for all the content of Season 1 and Season 2. Overall, I must admit that I liked Season 2 a lot more than I liked Season 1. It is though a bit difficult for me to express why that is exactly. For example, I would do a rewatch as a watch party in a year or two of Season 2 on this channel, but not of Season 1. I think, and I said this in earlier trailer analysis streams before the season came out, that having a very big plot point like Eregion will help this season in its structure, in its pacing, and also in how the story can develop, in contrast to Season 1, where it sometimes felt like the show did not know where to go exactly and the pacing suffered heavily from it and was far too busy setting things up. And this was also not needed to that extent anymore in Season 2, so that definitely helped the pacing, though unfortunately I felt in some later episodes they still had to do a lot of setup again, and then you notice, okay, we have to go through so many plot lines and setting them up for this other episode, and if you thought about the episode, what actually happened plot-wise, you would notice, well, not much actually happened. If you had to summarize it, there was not much going on. The characters also did not develop much further from there. That was also often very apparent in the Stranger, Nori and Poppy plotline. In the live stream I did yesterday, where we discussed also Season 2 a little bit here on this channel, it was very interesting to see when I asked what were your favorite aspects of the show, that most people answered the acting, the visuals, I think both of them were pretty much tied vote-wise, and the music, but very, very few people voted story. I think for a TV show, the visuals were, in my opinion, very impressive. Often, there's maybe still some room for improvement here and there. I liked the costumes, like Miriel often had very beautiful costumes, same with Farazon. There were a lot of details on the Númenórean costumes. There were always some writings on that you could read, and also that made sense in the context of the location. Further, they also had beautiful set pieces. The visual effects and so on worked quite well. There were also some cool details. For example, on Isildur's map, we can read, "Beware of the wild men," I think. Shoutouts to Rosemary for deciphering that. A pretty cool hint, which almost takes away what happens a few minutes later. Also, I think the cinematography improved a bit because we got more tracking shots, more different angles in locations and so on. It was a bit more static in Season 1 in direct comparison, even though the cinematography of Season 1 was also definitely not bad. But I think they just amped it up a little bit here. You also notice when it comes to extras and so on that more is going on in the background. There's still some room for improvement for sure, but you definitely notice the COVID restrictions that were upon Season 1 very heavily, and this was now less noticeable in Season 2 for sure. You could argue that they overused the Dutch angle, actually the German angle, so where the camera is slightly tilted, especially in the Adar scenes. It was present in Season 1 and they used it also for Season 2. But as said, it felt a bit overused here and there, but I was okay with it because it's a rarely seen stylistic device, and as a result, I appreciated that they tried something there. The music also worked for me pretty well, I have to admit, but that was also not a problem in Season 1. There I also enjoyed the music. I think Bear McCreary did a fantastic job and hit the right notes here. For example, the song at the end when they were in Rivendell and a bit of the Galadriel fighting part I had in my mind all day and was humming along during the day. It was pretty awesome, and he definitely had some awesome tracks. I also remember this one little scene with a dark wizard where he looks up into the stars and you hear this, I think it's a Bulgarian choir or something like this. Was also a cool piece. I enjoyed the music a lot. The actors also worked pretty fine for me in their scenes. Their performances were sometimes even outstanding when I would think of Charlie Vickers and Charles Edwards. They did, in my opinion, a fantastic job. And this also now ties to the story. And I think in the writing of the plot, the story, and the structure of the show, there lie, unfortunately, a lot of problems here. But even here, I must admit there were also some great moments in the show. The whole chamber drama between Celebrimbor and Anatar/Sauron was definitely, I think, the biggest highlight in the show, and was also the part of the story that worked best for me. We could see how Anatar/Sauron would slowly drive Celebrimbor into madness and influence him and get deeper and deeper into his mind and bring him to what he wants him to do. And at the end, this dynamic changed, and Celebrimbor could stand up again against Sauron and then have his last words saying to him, basically taking back the power in Eregion. And that was a very powerful scene in my opinion, and definitely a highlight in the show. But there were also some smaller scenes, like for example the introduction of Karas Gaer, where the Dark Wizard resides with his acolytes. And we learned some interesting story details there, and I was pretty interested in how this season might explore those details. We had these trackers who had some kind of curse upon them that the Dark Wizard could potentially lift. We had the resurrection of Feminem, one of the acolytes of the Dark Wizard that was defeated in the first season, and so on. So a lot of interesting details going on there in this region of Rhûn. At the point when this was introduced, I was actually interested and thought, okay, that's pretty cool. I want to know more about this. Though unfortunately the show did nothing with it. Then when we jumped to the dwarves, I also really liked the scenes on the market there, because it was an interesting place where we saw the normal folk buying things there. We got like a little sneak peek into the lives of a dwarf of Khazad-dûm, and that is something I really want to see, to be honest, as a huge fan of the books and of the dwarves. And there I got a little glimpse of this. Interestingly, in this context, there was also in episode 1 the scene where Sauron meets this old man on the road, and they have a brief talk, and then they walk towards a harbor where there's a ship and he wants to sail somewhere, potentially to Numenor. And that also I found very interesting, this place. Why not just explore Middle-earth a little bit? Have people travel, have people meet each other and talk and develop something out of this. This is something I desired greatly, and I thought, okay, that is pretty cool. I had really this, okay, this is Middle-earth feeling in this particular scene there, and hoped the show would do more out of it. Unfortunately, they did not. Then we had the scenes where King Durin III wanted to sacrifice himself and face the Balrog 1v1 basically, and these shots also looked very epic in my opinion. Visually absolutely impressive, also well done from a cinematography perspective. I think there they also did a good job. Though here I would also say, if you think too much about how they got to this point, it felt really forced in my opinion. Then also the introduction of Círdan, which is one of my favorite side elf characters in the books, was also a highlight for me personally. I like how Círdan looks, especially with beard. I guess it's a bit controversial that he shaves it off later, but it did not matter that much to me, to be honest. And I liked his scenes and dialogue with Elrond. Also Elrond, fantastic in this season as well. And yeah, what he said to Elrond was also quite interesting. I can definitely see that some people criticize some elements of this, like this whole Celebrimbor made perfection in Middle-earth, something like that. But what he means by that is that he was able to create devices that could basically stop or slow the decay as if they were in Aman. And in this regard, he's not wrong with what he's saying there. And even that we can have a discussion about this definitely shows that we had some good dialogue and some interesting ideas here in this section. Then, of course, Tom Bombadil and Gandalf at the end, or close to the end of episode 8, singing together the Tom Bombadil song was also a fantastic touch. They could have ended the episode there, and it would have been an awesome ending for the season as well. But they decided to go on a little bit further because there was still a lot of things still to do and to conclude. However, still the scene also sticks out to me and will be quite memorable in my opinion. In this context, I of course also like the Song of Gil-galad and him basically lamenting the elves leaving Middle-earth. Also in Numenor we had some strong scenes, for example with Elendil pointing at Pharazôn and saying, "No, you are the traitor." That was a very strong scene in my opinion. Then also some of the action and fighting scenes worked quite well for me. Not all of them, to be fair, but there's this one move where Galadriel basically shoots down this one orc. He's then flying through the air, and Galadriel also spins around and ignites her arrows at the torch of the orc that falls on the ground, and then shoots these burning arrows at other orcs. I think it was completely over the top, but I kind of liked the scene, to be honest. And if you think back of the Peter Jackson trilogy, we also had some of these ridiculous Legolas scenes as well, and some people also loved those scenes as well. And I think if they're done well, they can be quite fun in a fantasy show, in my opinion, and for me at least this scene worked. There are some other examples for that as well. But now this all sounds very positive, because I want to definitely in this video also give a huge section to the positive aspects of The Rings of Power Season 2, but there are also some complaints I have, and why my rating for this season definitely goes down quite a bit. Though I think I said at the beginning of the video I liked Season 2 far more than Season 1, and I would even rewatch Season 2 at some point, but not Season 1. Still, it has a lot of issues, and some of these issues were already present in the first season. One thing that is very noticeable for me watching now back at Season 2 is, and also Season 1, that the showrunners seem to have specific scenes in mind, and those scenes they want to make. And they have enough competent people around them that those scenes work in of themselves. But they have a very, and this is maybe also an issue of the writing room as well, they have a very big problem connecting these scenes and integrating them into their structure, into their greater plotline, and into the world itself. And this often leads to weird contradictions or the feeling that scenes are missing and characters are constantly teleporting as it is convenient for the writers. Like, they had the idea that Galadriel needs to get into Eregion and talk to Celebrimbor to get the 9 Rings of Power and then have a final showdown with Sauron. So, they just said, yeah, well, how does she actually get into the city? Let's just say there is a secret dwarven tunnel. That's very convenient, isn't it? Well, and the show is full of that, unfortunately. And this kind of often destroys the immersion for me quite well and gives me the feeling that the show is not structured and written well, or maybe was destroyed in the editing room. And don't get me wrong, this approach of just having magnificent scenes that work very well and are very strong in of itself can work quite well, especially if you had a long day, are very tired and exhausted and just want to relax watching a TV show. And then it can work. But I can't turn off for myself that I consistently look out for these inconsistencies, look out for how scenes are connected. Like, I can't really turn this off, and this then pulls me out of my immersion, and that gets very annoying after a time. For example, the scene with Elrond where he shows Nenya to Gil-galad, and then the next time we see him, he is in Khazad-dûm and asks his friend Durin the Force for help. And then you wonder, how did he get there? Wasn't it established a few episodes ago that just going into the general direction of Eregion is very dangerous and difficult, and they had trouble even reaching Eregion because of all the orcs swarming there, and suddenly he can just easily go to Eregion and from there go wherever he needs to be next. That is simply too convenient. Same with the orcs finding Galadriel. Like, when she is tasked to leave Eregion with the 9 rings, it is dark and the walls are not even breached yet, and she has a secret tunnel, and she brings, like, I don't know, 20 people outside or something, and then cut, the orcs are there, it's in the middle of the day. What did Galadriel do all those hours? It just feels so convenient that of course there are orcs and she now is taken prisoner. As said, the scene of meeting Adar is pretty awesome, and also the scene with Celebrimbor is great, but how those are connected is just questionable. And the show is completely full of that. And there are also some parts like Eregion and so on that were the good parts in the show. Think of what actually happened in Rhûn with the stranger, Nori and Poppy. Like, the story did so little progress there. You can summarize this with literally 3 sentences. He finds out who he is and his stuff. Poppy finds her lover, and Nori gets a new task leading people back to the other Hobbit folks, basically. That's everything that is happening there. And of course, you can always abstract things with a few sentences, but this plotline feels incredibly like a non-story. Nothing really happens because they keep this mystery box who the stranger is intact for 16 episodes. It is mind-boggling. Don't get me wrong, I really like the actors and their chemistry with each other and this light-hearted touch that the show gets through this particular section, but just from a writing perspective, it seems nothing happens and it's so isolated that it feels irrelevant. And in a way, that wouldn't be a big problem, but a big problem of the show is they don't have enough time for all these different plot arcs that they have. There are too many storylines in this show, and they don't have enough time to cover them adequately. To quote Bilbo, sort of stretched, if you know what I mean, like butter that has been scraped over too much bread. Like, they had not enough time to adequately explain what is actually going on in Númenor. Like, some of the stuff that happens off screen there could have been multiple episodes, in my opinion. Like, in one episode they showed Pharazôn, in the next episode Miriel, and then Pharazôn again. It feels like these nobles there in the palace are like leaves in the wind. Like the eagle scene, why is nobody questioning this? And then the sea trial that happens and people shout Miriel again, and you think, okay, Miriel's back in the game, and now it becomes interesting because you have 2 forces. On one side Pharazôn, on the other side Miriel, and now they have to kind of find a new balance of power in Númenor and so on. This sounds very interesting. And then in the next episode, no, Pharazôn just made up some weird accusation and people don't question this. Exploring this would actually be very interesting because I want to see how Pharazôn gets into power and brings people on his side again and schemes against Miriel and does all the interesting things, but they don't show it. It's just not there. Instead we get this half-baked explanation to just move on with the plot, but that would actually have been interesting to see. And when you then know that there are other plot lines like the one in Rhûn where basically nothing happens except this mystery box, you notice, well, wouldn't it have been better if they had the time from this plot for the other plots and then explore these elements a bit more? And that is exactly what I mean with this show has too many plot lines. It needs less. It needs a stronger focus. Just show us what is important if you only have 8 episodes. All they need for their main conflict in Season 2, which is a conflict in Eregion, is Eregion, Lindon, and maybe Khazad-dûm, and potentially also a bit of Mordor here and there. Everything else is, for this conflict at least, not needed. Maybe you can hint at some other locations and potential future plot lines here and there, and also start slowly developing those as well if you have the time. But if you don't have the time, just focus on the main conflict and just develop it very well. But they were not doing this, and this leads to further problems. For example, Eregion is a gigantic elven city, but isn't it strange that we only know like 3 characters, maybe 4 characters in this place? We know Celebrimbor and we know Mirdania. These are the main characters of Eregion, a gigantic elven city. And then later Anatar gets there as well, and then we have 3 characters. And then in the last episode we also have this captain there as well, who has then a slightly bigger role. We have seen him, I think, in a previous episode already, but if you're honest, you potentially don't know even his name, and that kind of is very telling of this place. They could have done so much more with it. Of course, we have some extras in the background and also some of the Gwais y Myrdain, the Ringsmiths Guild there, but they don't have any lines of dialogue, and as a result you don't really care for those people, and that is unfortunate. I think if they focused more on Eregion and on what is actually going on in the city, what are the different factions there, who has what interest, I think you could have done much, much more with this, and in the end you would actually care for those people and the city falling, but they decided against it because they spread everything out so far, and I think that is a missed opportunity in the show. And now that they started all these different plot lines, it's not going to get any better in the next season. If they still have 8 episodes, the plot lines are getting more complicated. Of course, now Eregion is not there anymore, but still we have Lindon, we now have Rivendell instead, we still have Numenor, we still have the Southlands, and so on. We have Mordor and potentially what Sauron might do there or not. So a lot of different locations are there for the next season already, and I don't see this getting better except they increase the number of episodes per season to, I don't know, 16 or something. And if you listened carefully to this point, I have not even said one single word about how accurate the show is regarding its source material, so what Tolkien actually wrote. And that is because it makes no sense for me at this point. Season 1 was already very far off from what Tolkien actually wrote, and season 2 just continues. I can totally understand that they change things, and by now I'm kind of ready to accept that there will be massive changes, and I can kind of live with that as long as they can tell the story in a good way. And even here, with my reduced expectations as a huge Tolkien book fan, even here the show struggles quite a lot just telling their story. Don't get me wrong, I would love a lore-accurate show, but I know it is kind of impossible if your task is to portray the whole Second Age, because it's just so complicated. There's so many different versions anyway. There is a specific right situation that is not easy for the creators of the show, and on top of that you also have the problems of the medium film, because only because something works in a book doesn't mean it works in film automatically as well. So there always need to be some changes to kind of make it work inside the requirements and restrictions of the medium itself. So I already adjusted my expectations towards the show. My critique is mostly purely based on how the show is structured, written and edited, I guess. And here the show still has so many problems. I think though that they improved in some areas, and that is always good to see that some parts are going into the right direction, but they are unfortunately still not really there to say, okay, this is an absolutely awesome show and I can recommend this to everybody and every Tolkien fan. Keep also in mind that this channel here is pretty hardcore on covering the books and going very deep into the lore and working very close to what Tolkien actually wrote. So my audience is also more leaning into this general direction. Further, I'm also a quite analytical mind, so keep this in mind, and I definitely try to explain my perception here, and yours can of course be very different from that, but just to explain where I'm coming from, and I also try to explain why I think the show has so many problems, and I hope I could kind of communicate this well enough here at the end. Though, like I said at the beginning, I definitely think the show improved, and I hope they will improve further in the next season. Thank you for watching. If you are still watching and listening and like the video, feel free to press the like button and maybe leave a comment and tell me how you liked Season 2 of Rings of Power. Further, also maybe subscribe for more lore content and press the annoying bell. There will be more book-focused content in the future, I think, here on this channel again, though also War of the Rohirrim will be coming into cinemas in December, so I will also cover trailers and stuff like this here on this channel if you're interested in that. Further, if any news comes out or something, we might return, or even to Rings of Power. Who knows, if there's something interesting to discuss on the games channel. There will be a bit more Elden Ring, still a very big topic here in my free time, playing a lot of Elden Ring. So if you're into that, check that channel as well. There's also stuff on Twitch, on the German channel, and so on. Maybe I also do this video again in German. I'm not 100% sure yet. We will see how this will work out in the end. But I think that's basically it for today. Huge shout out to all my supporters. Thank you for that. Much appreciated. And I would say thank you for watching and see you people next time. Goodbye.